I didn't think today would be the day that changed everything. I didn't think jumping into a ravine during an alien storm would rearrange the political structure of a galaxy. I didn't think much at all, honestly. I just ran. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Marcus Vale, 34 years old, former colonial marine, current deep survey contractor, and until about 72 hours ago, just another human trying to make enough credits to justify being this far from Earth. I was one of 400 people aboard the colony ship Perseverance when she went down over Valkara Prime. Bad ionic interference, the kind that turns navigation systems into expensive paperweights. We hit atmosphere wrong and came apart in 3 separate pieces. 11 of us walked away. I use the word walked loosely. Limped is more honest. Crawled, in 2 cases. The Valkyrie found us within the hour. I had heard of them before, the way you hear about things you never expect to actually see. The most powerful civilization in the known galaxy. A matriarchal empire spanning 200 worlds, with a military so advanced that other species simply stopped challenging them about 3,000 years ago. They were tall, elegant, and moved with a kind of effortless precision that made everything they did look choreographed. Their skin carried a faint bioluminescence, shifting between soft blues and greens depending on their mood. Their armor was crystalline, translucent, and apparently capable of absorbing weapons fire that would level a small building. They looked at us the way a person looks at a stray animal that has wandered into the garden. The officer in charge was named Sarah Vin. She had the posture of someone who had never once been questioned, and had no intention of starting now. She informed us, through a translator device clipped to her collar, that we were being classified as Class 4 primitives under Imperial Protocol 7, that we would be held in a temporary processing camp, and that within 48 hours, we would be relocated off-world to whatever primitive corner of the galaxy we had come from. She didn't say it with cruelty. That was almost worse. She said it the way you announce that the furniture delivery has been rescheduled. Inconvenient, but not particularly interesting. I didn't argue. I looked at the 10 other survivors around me, most of them in shock, a few quietly crying. One man named Drev just staring at the alien sky with the expression of someone whose brain had politely stopped processing new information. I made a mental note of the camp layout, the number of guards, the direction of the wind, and the strange amber color of the clouds building on the horizon. Old marine habits. They don't leave you. They just go quiet for a while and then show back up when things get bad. The processing camp was a collection of portable Valkyrie structures, elegant even in their temporary form, arranged in a neat perimeter around our crash debris. A royal transport ship sat on the ridge above us, larger than anything in our fleet, gleaming in the alien light. I had been told, in the fragments of conversation I could overhear, that it was carrying some kind of official on a planetary inspection tour. I didn't know who. I didn't particularly care. Then the storm hit. A Category 9 ionic tempest, I later learned. The kind that forms fast and hits like a wall. One moment the air was still, and the next it was screaming. The amber clouds I had noticed earlier came down like they had somewhere urgent to be. Lightning that wasn't quite lightning, more like solid columns of ionized energy, hammered the ridge in rapid succession. The Valkyrie soldiers moved immediately, coordinated and disciplined, securing their equipment and falling into protective formations around their communication arrays. And in the middle of all of that, I heard a sound that cut through everything. A child screaming. I turned toward the ridge in time to see the royal transport shudder violently as an ionic column struck directly beside it. Part of the landing ramp gave way. Something small was thrown outward from the opening, tumbling in an arc over the ridge's edge, and then it was gone. I was already moving before I had consciously decided to move. I heard Saravin shout something behind me. I heard one of the other survivors call my name. I didn't stop. The ravine below the ridge was about 40 feet deep, narrow, lined with jagged rock formations that the storm had turned into a chaos of noise and shadow. I grabbed a length of cable from the crash debris as I ran, looped it around a structural bar jutting from the wreckage, and went over the edge. The descent was not elegant. It was controlled falling with occasional grip. My hands were bleeding before I reached the bottom. The ionic discharges were lighting up the ravine walls in bright, violent flashes, and the sound was enormous, like being inside something that was being torn apart. I found her in the dark, tucked against the far wall where the fall had carried her, small, about the size of a 12-year-old human child, her bioluminescence flickering in an irregular pattern that I instinctively understood meant distress. She was conscious, which was good. She was pinned under a collapsed ionic relay that had fallen with her, which was not. The relay was actively discharging. I could feel it in the air, a high-frequency hum that made my teeth ache. I reached for it and heard a sharp intake of breath from the girl. "That will kill you," she said. The translator on her collar, smaller and more delicate than Saravin's, rendered her voice in accented but clear words. "It won't," I said, and I meant it. Human nervous systems don't interface with ionic frequencies the way crystalline biology does. The discharge that would have sent a Valkyrie into system failure would give me a bad burn and a headache. I had read that in a survey brief 3 years ago, and filed it in the back of my mind under things that might matter someday. Someday was now. I grabbed the relay and pulled it free. The discharge hit me along my left forearm like a hot wire pressed to skin. I kept moving, got my arms under the girl, and put my back to the ravine wall as a second ionic burst came through. I took it across my shoulders. It hurt in the specific way that reminds you that your body is a temporary arrangement. Then I climbed back up with her, one-handed on the cable, in the middle of the worst storm Velcara Prime had seen in a decade, and when I pulled myself over the edge of the ridge I was soaking wet, half-burned, and out of breath in a way that told me I was going to feel this tomorrow. Every weapon in the camp was pointed at me. Saravin's voice was the quietest it had been since we landed. "Put her down." I set the girl down carefully, made sure she was steady on her feet, and raised my hands. Then I said the only thing that felt accurate. "She's okay, you're welcome." They detained me immediately, which was fine. I sat in a small containment structure while the storm finished and the camp returned to something resembling order. Saravin interrogated me for 40 minutes. Her questions circled the same territory over and over, looking for the angle, the motive, the transaction she was certain had to be there. What did I want? What was I trying to take? Who had given me instructions? My answers didn't change. Nothing. Nothing. Nobody. I could see it genuinely baffled her. Not because she thought I was lying, but because the alternative, that I had simply run toward a child in danger, because she was a child in danger, didn't fit into any framework she had for understanding behavior. Valkyrie society was built on elaborate systems of obligation, status, and strategic alliance. Spontaneous altruism toward a member of a higher species class wasn't just unusual, it was, in her world, essentially meaningless. Things that gained you nothing were things that didn't happen. She left without reaching a conclusion. The girl came to see me an hour later. 2 guards flanked her, and she ignored them completely in the way that only very young royalty or very old generals can manage. She stood in front of the containment barrier and looked at me with large, dark eyes that held more intelligence than most adults I had met. "You knew the ionic discharge wouldn't kill you," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "So you calculated it was safe." "I thought about that. I calculated it was survivable. There's a difference." She was quiet for a moment. "What is the difference?" "Safe means there's no cost. Survivable means you accept the cost and do it anyway." She looked at my bandaged arm, and then back at my face, and something shifted in her expression that I couldn't quite name. She told me her name was Lyravel. She did not tell me, at that moment, that she was the daughter of Queen Maravel the Eternal, sovereign of the entire Valkyrie Empire. I found that out 20 minutes later from a very pale Valkyrie soldier who appeared to be experiencing the administrative crisis of his career. The Queen's response came within hours. The orders were transmitted down the chain of command in what I was told was an unprecedented speed for Imperial communication. The processing camp stopped being a processing camp. The soldiers stopped being guards. The 11 of us were suddenly being offered food, medical attention, and a level of quiet, careful courtesy that none of us quite knew what to do with. Saravin, to her credit, delivered the change in status without visible embarrassment, and with only a brief, complicated look in my direction that I chose to interpret as respect. We were being taken to Velcara Throne. The capital world was the most extraordinary thing I had ever seen, and I have stood on 17 planets. It was a world city, every surface built upon and shaped, but not in the cold way of industrial construction. The Valkyrie, built with living materials. Their towers grew as much as they were assembled, crystalline and organic at once, catching the light of two suns and scattering it in cascades of color that had no human names. The air smelled like something between rain and electricity. Everything glowed softly at night, the entire planet a slow-breathing lamp. I catalogued all of it, quietly, from the window of the transport. Old habits. The court of Velkara was vast, thousands of beings assembled in a space that made the grandest human architecture look like a sketch. Representatives from 40 civilizations lined the hall in arrangements of careful precedence, each one positioned according to centuries of diplomatic protocol. Species I had only seen in databases stood in groups, watching our small human procession enter with expressions that ranged from curiosity to mild offense. I was wearing patched colonial gear. My left arm was bandaged. I had not slept in 30 hours. I walked in like I owned the floor, because the only alternative was to look like I didn't belong there, and I had made a decision somewhere over the capital that I was done being apologetic about existing. Queen Maravel was at the far end of the hall, and she was everything the stories suggested and more. Ancient in the way that carries no frailty, only accumulated weight. Her bioluminescence moved in colors so deep, they seemed to come from somewhere inside the visible spectrum, rather than on it. When she spoke, the floor resonated. She looked at me for a very long time. I looked back. I don't know what she was looking for, but I have been told I have an honest face, which has historically been both an asset and a problem. "You saved my daughter," she said. "You were classified as a primitive. You had no reason, no incentive, no protection of law or alliance. You acted anyway." "She was a kid in a ravine," I said. "That's reason enough." The court erupted. I heard the sound of several hundred beings reacting with varying degrees of shock and indignation to what was, apparently, an extreme breach of formal address. Somewhere behind me, one of the other survivors made a sound like they were reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. The Queen raised one hand. The hall went completely silent. She was smiling. It was a small thing, almost private, as though it had arrived without her permission. Beside her, Liravel was watching me with bright, serious eyes. Then the Queen spoke the words that changed the galaxy. She reclassified humanity. Not just me, all of humanity. Every person on Earth, every colonist on every rock we had managed to plant a flag on, every survey contractor drifting through someone else's star system trying to make a living, Class 4, primitive to Class Y sovereign, in a single declaration, in front of representatives from 40 civilizations, who would carry the news home before the day was done. Full diplomatic recognition, full treaty rights, a permanent seat on the Grand Conclave that governed 200 worlds. Protected status for every human ship and settlement, effective immediately. The room did not erupt this time. It went the specific kind of quiet that happens when something genuinely unprecedented has occurred, and everyone present needs a moment to recalibrate their understanding of the universe. Then the Queen offered me a personal choice, anything within her power to grant. The ambassadors leaned forward. I could feel the weight of expectation in the room, everyone calculating what a human would want, what any being in this position would want, wealth or territory, or power or influence. I thought for a moment, then I said, "The other 10 survivors, I want them to actually go home, not relocated, not processed, real homes, safe passage, somewhere they can recover from what happened." The silence that followed was different from the last one. After. Liravel leaned toward her mother and said something quietly. The Queen listened, and the smile returned, less private this time. "Note this in the Imperial Archive," the Queen said, not to me, but to the entire hall. The human asked for others, not himself, noted exactly as it happened. Months later, I sat on a balcony in the capital with Liravel, as she studied, and I watched 3 moons rise over a city that glowed like something dreamed. She asked me if I had known I would survive the ravine. I told her no. I told her that I had known that not jumping was the one outcome I definitely couldn't live with. So really, the ravine was the safer choice. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Humans are very strange." I agreed with her. "I think the galaxy is better for it," she said. I looked at the alien sky, and I thought about the Perseverance, and the 400 people we had lost, and the 11 who had made it. and all the human worlds that were going to wake up tomorrow in a different universe than the one they had fallen asleep in. They called us primitives, and maybe we were. Maybe we never evolved past the part of us that runs toward the screaming without stopping to calculate the return on investment. Maybe every advanced civilization in the galaxy had eventually optimized that out of themselves, traded the instinct for something more efficient, more strategic, more sensible. We hadn't. Turns out, the galaxy had been waiting for someone who hadn't.